Welcome back to our introduction to Fences PowerPoint. And basically, kind of similar to Intro to Drama, I wanted to kind of take us through a broad intro to both the play that we will be spending on, the next month or so, analyzing and writing our second paper on, and then also the playwright himself, August Wilson. So I'm hoping that nobody has read this play before, but I've had students that have read it in a high school class before. So if you have honor code, you're gonna read it again, right? And this play has seen many iterations of it. So the photo on the far left is, to my understanding, from one of the, original productions of it. It first debuted in 1987. So, sort of it was on Broadway around the same time. And then the middle photo here is from the 2010 revival that was on Broadway. And you might recognize two of the actors here. We've got Denzel Washington and then Viola Davis. And then the photo on the very right hand side is the kind of a cover movie photo of the movie adaptation, which also starred Denzel Washington and Viola Davis. And to my understanding and memory, it was Denzel Washington's directorial debut, and it came out in 2016. So this play has been around for a while, but because it's been kind of coming out every decade or so, not a lot of people might be familiar with it. But before we get into the play itself, I want to talk about the man that wrote it, August Wilson. He was born in 1945 and he passed in 2005. And if you remember nothing from this person, you need to give respect to the hat. I don't know if this was like, I've only ever seen a handful of photos of him. In the majority of them, he is wearing his writing hat, which I very much respect. And it just, it's part of who he was, to my understanding. So August Wilson, he was born, his birth name was Frederick August Kittle Jr., and he is a Pennsylvania native. He was born in the Hill District of Pittsburgh. I'm not sure if any of us have been out to Pittsburgh. I personally have not yet, but a lot of my students have, and obviously Google is free. I've seen photos. But the Hill District, we're actually going to talk a lot more about when we come back to class next week. So stay tuned for that historical discussion. His mother was a housekeeper. His birth father was a baker and a pastry chef. And he is mixed. So his mother was black, his father was white. And because they did have six kids, all mixed. To my understanding, they very much struggled being biracial in a predominantly Black neighborhood, which was and is the Hill District. And a lot of that struggle was exemplified whenever their mother divorced their absentee father. And his stepfather, a man named David Bedford, who, to my understanding, wasn't much better, at least in treatment to August Wilson and his siblings. So David Bedford was a high school football star and an ex-convict. And I promise you that detail comes back around. So after she got remarried, they relocated to Hazelwood, which pretty much was the complete opposite of the Hill District in that it was predominantly white, working class, And unfortunately, times didn't get better for the Wilson family. They experienced quote unquote racial hostility. Again, I've had a lot of students that can identify and have shared similar experiences in the past. Whenever you are of mixed race, not being able to fully identify with, one side versus the other side. And I can only imagine how Wilson would have felt. Also, having all of this happen right around the time of the civil rights movement, adding that extra layer of conflict, just being a Black man in America. So he did end up dropping out of school at around the 10th grade. Allegedly, his teacher accused him of plagiarizing a 20-page paper. And I'm assuming other reasons as well, he never finished school. But he did all right for himself. So he officially changed his name to August Wilson in 1965 to honor his mother after his birth father's death. Basically, just really wanting to stand by his mother that, from my understanding, single-handedly raised him and his 5 siblings. And then again, like many other authors we've been talking about over this semester, Wilson had a love of reading and writing from an early age. He obviously, was able to write a 20-page paper on Napoleon the First. So writing was something that he had always done. In 1968, he co-founded the Black Horizon Theater in the Hill District. And I don't know if it's still there, actually, but that is where he began showing his plays to the public. So over his tenure, he's written 16 plays. He won 2 Pulitzers, 2 Tonys, and is really regarded as one of the kind of like modern day playwrights of that generation. So unfortunately, he did pass away from liver cancer in 2005. But he is honored in many ways since. So in 1987, he was living in St. Paul, Minnesota at the time, and they made August Wilson Day, which is really cool. And then right after his death, Broadway debuted the August Wilson Theater, which is still very much a staple, in the Broadway area in New York City. Currently, Dog Day Afternoon is playing there. One of my personal goals in life is to see an August Wilson production in the August Wilson Theater. I'm not sure if that has ever actually happened, but if and when it does, I'm gonna be there. And then he was also posthumously inducted into the American Theater Hall of Fame. So a little bit about Fences. I'm sorry. I think I got the date wrong in the other slide. So it did premiere in 1985 at Yale University's theater. And it's a part of what August Wilson called the Pittsburgh cycle. So I am not sure if this is common amongst other playwrights or artists, but he has 10 plays that are sort of following similar themes and kind of taken place more or less around the city of Pittsburgh. So right from the bat, we know that Fences takes place in and around the city of Pittsburgh because it's part of this cycle. And just the cycle in general, quote, explores the evolving African American experience and examines race relations in America. So again, out of those 10, this is number 6. I'll talk about a few of the others in a second. So like I said at the start of this slide or at the start of this video, it had its first Broadway run in 1987 to 88, where it won 4 Tonys. And then in 2010, it had its revival, where it won an additional 3. And then in 2016, like I said before, Denzel Washington adapted it into a movie. And that's actually how I first came to see Fences, was watching the movie. It was nominated for 4 Oscars and it won one. My understanding it being Viola Davis's second Oscar win. I believe her first one was Doubt, I want to say, with Meryl Streep. So just a little bit more about Denzel Washington. Even though he never, to my understanding, ever officially met August Wilson, he, for multiple reasons, has really sort of pioneered bringing August Wilson's work into the next generation. So he directed Fences in 2016, which a decade later, we're obviously still talking about it. And since then, he has either directed, produced, or starred in 2 other plays that are all around the Pittsburgh cycle. So he has said in multiple interviews that his goal is to do the same for the other, kind of finish out the Pittsburgh cycle and make these really formative plays from August Wilson into modern, movies, maybe a TV series. So the other 2, which you might have seen or heard of, the one is called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, and it came out on Netflix. I forget what year, but it was sort of, it's infamously known as being Chadwick Boseman's final performance. So I want to say, 2018, 2019, I believe he passed away. And then the other one that came out a little bit more recently, also on Netflix, is called The Piano Lesson. So, we're obviously going to be talking about the play, reading the play, but I will also, and you'll see on the actual PowerPoint, I will have clips from the movie adaptation of Fences, along with a few clips I found from past Broadway, iterations of the play, because there's something to be said about, those of us that are more visual learners, we need to, or we like to see, the characters as we're reading them, or, before, after we read them. There's something to be said about validity, in any art form. So we will definitely show and talk about a couple, movie and Broadway clips. But I also encourage y'all to, if you have access to watch the movie, I'm not sure if it's streaming anywhere for free right now. I do know, like I said before, the other 2 from the Pittsburgh cycle are available on Netflix. And again, I just think it's so cool that Denzel is really sort of, the catalyst to introducing August Wilson's work to the next generation. And again, like I said before, that's how I first got introduced to it. And Denzel and Viola Davis's performances are and were fantastic. So just, highly recommend. And then the last thing I want to say about Fences is we do know that it is semi-autobiographical. Like I said before, we know that it takes place in and around the city of Pittsburgh. And Wilson himself said that it aimed at, quote, uncovering the nobility and the dignity of the adults that he grew up around, that generation which shielded its children from all the indignities they went through. So again, just a brief general introduction to the play. We will obviously talk a lot more about it. The next slide, which I'm obviously not going to talk about right now, gets into historical context. So just, understanding that a lot of what you will be reading does take place during a specific time and location in our American history. And because of that, it's important to understand, if we're not already familiar, what the, for lack of a better word, what the vibe was to be Black in America in the 1950s. So that is what we will talk about in class. But thank you for watching.